It's one of the oldest cities in the entire world. The remains of the center of the Norte Chico people, who were among the first humans to form civilization on our planet. This is the sacred city of Caral, a site whose size, complexity, and antiquity rival its more well-known contemporaries in the Old World and possibly even predates the pyramids of Giza. Since their discovery, these ruins have pushed back the time frame on the beginning of ancient American society and reshaped our view of just how advanced these people became when their city flourished in what is today Western Peru. And today, we're going to dive into the heart of Norte Chico's capital and discover what exactly makes it one of the most fascinating archaeological discoveries in recent history. So 5,000 years ago, civilization was still in its infancy all around the globe. In Mesopotamia and the Indus Valley, cities had begun to pop up as agriculture brought people to live closer together and complex societies had started to form. That's fairly common knowledge, but what is often brushed over is that people in South America had begun the exact same process at around the same time. This ancient American society is referred to as the Norte Chico civilization, also called Caral. Sprouting up on the coast of western Peru, the civilization would eventually encompass more than 30 known settlements in the region, mostly centered along 3 rivers. What's unique about the Norte Chico is that one of the leading hypotheses suggests that what initially brought the people together wasn't just large-scale agriculture, like in the Old World, but rather seafood. This is called the theory of maritime foundation for Andean civilization and suggests that food sources like fish, clams, and even small whales made up the bulk of this ancient diet. It also suggests that the civilization began on the coast and only later moved inland. This theory has since been greatly expanded on, and it's no longer believed that seafood was the only thing they ate, as signs of domesticated crops like maize, sweet potato, avocado, beans, and squash have also been found. The evidence for this comes from cutting-edge archaeological science by examining microscopic traces in ancient fecal matter and soil samples, and even identifying ancient specks of cornstarch on the blunt edges of stone tools. Just before we continue with today's video, I do want to tell you that this video is brought to you by Squarespace, the all-in-one website platform for entrepreneurs from beginners to seasoned pros. Look, no matter how busy you are, Squarespace makes it easy to create a stunning website, connect with your audience, and even sell your products or services, all under your control. Now let me share some incredible Squarespace features with you. First up, this fluid engine is a bit like a magic wand for website design. Look, I'm no tech whiz or design whiz, but with Squarespace's drag and drop magic, you can turn a basic idea into a polished site with ease. Unleash your creativity without breaking a sweat. Next, the Squarespace extensions, they connect your website to third-party tools, which means your website's functionality is limitless. No more, oh, I wish my site could do that. With Squarespace, it can happen. And Squarespace also have courses now. You can create and sell an online course. It's incredible. You get a professional layout, custom videos, and thanks to Fluid Engine, it looks amazing. And the best part is you can set the price. One-time fees or subscriptions. Share your knowledge and make it work for you with Squarespace courses. Ready to create your own online presence? Head to squarespace.com/megaprojects for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, use the promo code MEGAPROJECTS to save 10% of your first purchase of a website or a domain. And now back to today's video. Radiocarbon dating has placed the earliest possible dates of this period of agriculture at 3700 BC, though most data collected indicates the latter date of around 3200 BC. For several hundred years after the onset of farming and large-scale trade of seafood, these small population centers steadily grew, both in the inland river valleys and on the coast. But sometime between 2700 and 2500 BC, it was the inland cities that exploded with population growth, an expansion period attributed to the extensive use of irrigation canals, allowing the cities to begin using the land in places that before had just been too arid to support crops. It is also during this period of expansion that the heart of the civilization began to emerge, the largest concentration of people on the entire continent, the capital city of Caral. Norte Chico's largest city was first discovered in the 1940s by American professor Paul Kosuk, the same man who's credited with the discovery and first serious study of the Nazca Lines, by the way. However, the sacred city of Caral didn't catch Kosuk's attention at the time, as it didn't appear to have the density of artifacts that were present at other sites. It wasn't until the 80s and 90s that archaeologists began to pay more attention to it, by which time its true value was beginning to be understood. Including the settlements around the edges of the city, Caral had a population of as many as 20,000 people, an impressive achievement for the time. The city itself was divided into two halves, an upper and lower, which were naturally separated by the geography of the valley. The lower half of Caral was home to the working class, sporting less complex architecture and other signs of lower status, such as a simpler diet and evidence that single rooms served more than one function. The lower half contained some small pyramids and one large structure known as the Temple of Amphitheatre. This temple was possibly used for musical and ritual purposes and certainly contained fires of some sort, as its architects made sure to include ventilation ducts to allow for smoke to be ventilated. Just up the road, the upper half of the city was home of the elite, this being either the governmental rulers, religious leaders, or any other profession that made someone somewhat important. The upper section was comprised of 6 huge complexes, each made of a central pyramid, a plaza, and vast residential buildings. The pyramids at the center of each complex are among the most intriguing finds in the whole city, with each being given a different name. The Quarry, Gallery, Lesser, Huanca, and Central Pyramids are the 5 smaller ones, with the aptly named Great Temple taking the crown for the largest pyramid in the site. The Great Temple has an impressive height of 30 meters or 98 feet, and it's certainly the most impressive building in all of Caral. However, it most likely wasn't planned this way, as every temple in the site shows evidence that they were built in layers, building on top of older structures. This only adds to the understanding of why so many ancient civilizations built their own versions of pyramids. They're not only stable and fairly straightforward in design, but as seen in Caral, the simpler ones can also be gradually brought to their full height, added to over the course of several generations, without the need for mass or skilled labor that would be required for more complex structures. There are dozens of pyramids throughout the city, with the 6 major ones in the upper half and many smaller ones scattered throughout, and though scientists can't nail down an exact date for their construction, the early estimates place their inception at around 2600 BC, which would mean there's a good chance that many of them are even older than the more famous Great Pyramid of Giza. But occupations weren't simply limited to lower-class laborers and the elite. One of the reasons why Caral is recognized as one of the earliest civilizations is because it shows evidence of job specialization, with specific places designed for the production of, for example, cotton, which was then traded with coastal villages for seafood. Now, investigations at Caral have uncovered more than we could ever have expected about life in the ancient Andes. For starters, Caral doesn't seem to contain any references to warfare. No weapons have been found, no bodies indicating combat, not even a carving depicting some sort of warrior. As far as we can tell, this was a fairly peaceful society that, at the very least, didn't wage war. Something else that Caral lacks entirely are ceramics. This is probably why earlier researchers were hard-pressed to find any familiar artifacts, leading them to assume that there simply weren't any. It wasn't until Peruvian archaeologist Ruth Shady realized that the lack of ceramics meant that the culture must have existed before their invention. She was among the first to suggest that Caral was populated around 5,000 years ago, which, of course, was later confirmed. Pinning down exact dates in archaeological records is never easy, which is why it almost always includes an error margin of a few hundred years. But researchers at Caral Supe hit the jackpot when they uncovered woven reed bags. Because these bags are made of organic matter, they were able to be radiocarbon dated, bringing a highly precise date of 2627 BC. There may be even older artifacts which have recently been uncovered, but they're yet to be carbon dated, so that's some news to watch out for in the future. Other objects that were able to be carbon dated included dozens of flutes uncovered in the temple of the amphitheater in the lower half of the city. 33 of these flutes were found in total, made from llama bones in 2150 BC. In other temples, flutes were found to be made from pelican or condor bones. Art seemed to be an important part of the Caral lifestyle, not just in the musical sense with the flutes, but in a visual form as well. To date, no paintings and very few carvings have been found on the site, but one piece of art was spotted from the sky in the year 2000. This massive image, called a geoglyph, was made from placing stones on the desert floor with the full picture only visible from above. It depicts a human with long hair and a gaping mouth, an odd sight to be sure, and eerily similar to later carvings hundreds of miles to the north at the site called Cerro Sechin, which depicted a bleeding figure with long hair and a similar open mouth, one of the many evidences leading the experts to suggest that much of the Andean culture originated in Caral Supe and spread throughout the region in the centuries after its peak. After all, depictions of certain monkeys found in Caral suggest that even during its occupation, the city had contact with people living in the Amazon, so their influence was already clearly growing. One of the regional cultural staples that may have originated in Caral is human sacrifice. The Aztecs were perhaps the most well known for this, but it seems that the people of Caral beat them to it by a few thousand years. Found near the Great Temple, the body of a teenage male was found with his fingers and feet removed, suggesting ritual sacrifice. And interestingly, his wasn't the only set of human remains found in the area. Others include a baby wrapped with beads and stones, and in 2016, the remains of a woman were found who researchers believe to be one of the city elites. Now, for all we've discovered in the great city of Caral, there are many unanswered questions left on the table. For starters, quipus. A quipu is a method of recording information using knots in ropes, and it was used extensively by the Inca Empire in this same region during the 15th century. It was often thought that their use didn't stretch back too much further than this, but that theory was thrown out of the window when one was discovered on the 12th step of the Caral's Gallery Pyramid, meaning that the people of Norte Chico were likely the original inventors of this peculiar system, at least in this half of the world. The only problem is, we aren't really sure what they mean. Analysis of hundreds of Incan quipus has revealed that the majority of them record numerical information, and our knowledge on this topic is helped out by the fact that the Spanish were actually able to speak with the Inca about them, before they conquered their entire empire and ordered the burning of all of the keepers. Regardless, this is still a lot more to go off of than the ones from 4,000 years ago. Some researchers believe that the quipus were not only used for numbers, but also for letters, making a long string of specific knots akin to words in a sentence. This is supported by a few stories from the Spanish, who reported that Incan historians would use quipus when telling their tales. According to one nobleman from the time, the most skilled Incans could even read the knots with their eyes closed. If this is all true, there could be a lot more to these quipus than we may ever know, and it's possible that the ones from Caral represent one of the oldest writing systems in human history. More questions lie in its governmental structure. Caral seems to be well planned, with its buildings, theaters, and pyramids all placed in a coordinated manner. This strongly suggests a structured society with laborers, skilled workers, and more all answering to a central authority. But what this authority was, we simply have no idea. Perhaps the biggest mystery of all is why Caral was eventually abandoned. It was occupied for a few thousand years and featured the most impressive architecture on the continent, but the archaeological record suddenly goes dead around 1800 BC. Again, the evidence points to a surprising lack of warfare, meaning they probably weren't conquered or wiped out. Famine is always an option, but this too struggles to explain everything, as their mixed diet of various vegetables, fruits, grain, and seafood gave them solid food security if one of their crops failed. A big earthquake or devastating flood seem like likely assumptions, but there's no evidence for any sort of catastrophic natural disaster either. As one researcher put it, it is much more likely that several factors contributed to the decline of the state, including internal strife and discord, which is very difficult to prove in archaeology. At the end of the day, it seems that why this flourishing civilization suddenly abandoned their prized pyramid city is a question for which we're not going to soon have an answer.